Calling the June of the Durham Planning Board to order. Roll call.
Erica Namangaya.
Heather Grant.
Peyton McManus.
My planner. Everybody should be here, but Richard may be a little bit late due to traffic.
Paul Rasmussen.
Sally Tobias.
Tom DeCampo.
All right. Well, let's see. Yes, everybody should be here.
Maybe they can't find a place to park.
And so now comes the question of, Erica, I'm going to hold off on sitting you for anybody until we get someplace where voting matters.
Sounds good.
Just remind me I should seat you. Approval of the agenda. All right. Everybody happy with the order of the agenda?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. We'll move to.
Hold on, because I want to have a brief discussion about the email Peyton and Tom sent out. Where would that go?
Other business?
Okay, so we'll add that to that.
That's fine. Thank you.
All right, we're going to add another bullet under other business for a Tom and Peyton downtown housing. Welcome, Mr. Kelly. Town planner, okay, so approve the agenda as amended.
A bunch of people coming in.
Somebody want a second?
I will
Second.
second that. You can second.
Seconded by Peyton. All right. All in favor? And, all right,
Let's just.
Let's see
let's
the,
welcome Emily and Rob
And Richard.
and Richard. I welcomed Richard. already.
well, I'll take a second welcome.
All right, and that gives us a full slate. So all in favor of approving the agenda as amended?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. So I also would like to make a note that due to things, does Rob need to get sworn in again?
No.
No. All right. Monday night, the town council appointed Rob as a regular member of the board, full slate of regular members. So,
Congratulations.
Thank you. Do I have to give a long speech?
after your name off the agenda.
And we only have one alternate right now.
We are down to one alternate.
Heather.
We would be happy to have, or third, if anybody out there is interested.
It's super fun.
You'll learn a lot.
You do.
It's not boring. All right, town planners report.
Yeah, and just Erica has more seniority, but I think Erica talked about it, and there's certain times when she needs to, can't make meetings, so she was more comfortable remaining as an alternate. Just so you know, so that's why Erica didn't put in her name. Once again, our friends at Tideline, I'm delighted that they're doing very well. They seem successful and thriving, but you probably had to walk a little ways to find a parking space. With Tideline on making a sandwich board, and they're going to pay for it. They've been, they're great. They're working with us. They're partners in this issue. They got a sign designed, a meeting tonight, no Tideline parking. We were debating among the staff whether it should have anything about towing and force, but probably not. It probably will have to go to the Historic District Commission, so we were out, make the design appropriate. And so we're going to have this made. As I say, Tideline is going to pay for it. The relics are potentially 3 times a month. When the planning board meets on 2 Wednesdays and the Historic District Commission meets on 1 Thursday, and those are the only board meetings on Wednesday, Thursday nights. We have a number of them on Monday and Tuesday, but they're not busy on Monday. They're busiest Friday evening, Saturday and Sunday when town hall's closed. So we're going to have a sign made, and before every meeting, I will take it out and put it by the driveway, I'll, find an appropriate place that's prominent, and, hopefully people will respect that, and you won't have trouble finding parking spaces. And then I'll take it in at the end of the evening.
Michael, just to confirm, a non-affixed temporary sign that goes out for 3 hours, 3 times a month, sign that needs to be approved by the historic district?
Well, I think so, because we're in the historic district,
Yeah.
and they do have purview over signs,
Is that a sign?
and
Let's look at signs.
and they do approve sandwich board signs. So, yeah.
Will that be approved at the next HGC?
Yeah,
which is
the next
July
meeting
11th?
is the 11th of July, because of the
So we still
holiday.
have this meeting, and we have another planning board meeting where we will not. If it's not approved at the next, then we won't go, by the time we get around getting a sign made, the season will be over, and
We
we'll
will be
have spent the
very,
summer.
very annoyed with the town as a whole if this doesn't get fixed until the winter.
You're welcome to park at my house if you want to.
I would just-
Like if that's like the big issue is it's right there.
We should be able to park in
It's
our.
not only inconvenient for us, and I think we can all withstand that inconvenience, and it is inconvenient, but if there was a public hearing where the public needs to come, they're at a serious disadvantage. It would almost be impossible to get more than 10 people, because the park, I'm all the way down that street, and Tide Line was full. So in the event that the real public hearing, it's not sustainable, this approach. So right now, I think it's fine, maybe the next one's fine, but if you have an ordinance that's requiring public opinion, I would say it's prudent to get this done sooner rather than later. I'm sure everyone's aware of that, but I just was thinking that for the public, they're at a serious disadvantage here.
Temporary printed
Oh, we
out
could probably
sign
do
just to
that.
throw up there
Oh, that's a good
until
idea.
it's done, because
Yeah.
we still have one meeting we have to come through, and it's,
I was going to say, if it was just the town of Durham putting that board up, would we need permission from the historic?
Yeah, the town of Durham is subject to the ordinance, made itself subject to it.
They made
They
themselves
made,
subject to.
they were good soldiers, and the Durham made itself subject to the HDC. But
But not
anything-
to a bunch of other stuff that's even more critical.
Right, well, that's true. That's the only thing I know of where we're subject to the ordinance, and that can be overruled by 2/3 vote of the council, but that's never happened. But I will try to get a temporary sign
Do you have
up there.
anything?
that would be good.
Yeah.
Do you have
yeah.
anything more for us?
That's it.
All right. Any questions for the town planner? Reports from board members who serve on other committees.
Energy Committee. So our next meeting is July 2nd, which is the coming Tuesday. We have a presentation from effort to do solar across the seacoast, and there's some competition involved in that, and also some discount pricing of residents. So we're still just hearing more about this project, and we will, obviously, it's going to run all summer, so if the Energy Committee decides to partner with this, then we'll of course let the town know through Friday updates and social media and so forth.
Can I just ask one
Yes.
question? Sorry. On the solar and the approach to deliver more solar, provide more, do you know if anyone's doing any incentives where there might get additional building incentives or other things, or there could be, let's say, affordable housing incentives if they were to, mount solar apply solar into their building? Are you aware of any incentives that anyone's doing around solar and affordable housing, or any other sort of incentives?
I haven't heard of any incentives yet. I know that at the charrette that Michael shared, that was a part of the discussion, was including solar, thing that the Service Credit Union is looking to do. There are a lot of tax incentives already in that a number of municipalities, including Durham, have property tax, plus you get a 30% tax credit. So a developer would get that from the federal government, plus would have their property taxes waived. So there's some pretty strong incentives already. So I don't know that anyone is looking at doing an additional kind of density incentive, but that's something that we could talk about in terms of what was raised last time, and thinking about different incentives, ways that we could use the density bonus to encourage the sorts of things that we have set as goals for the town, whether that be affordable housing, but also some of our environmental kind of goals. And let me check other notes, because the Energy Committee did discuss all of the questions that the planning board had sent them. So in terms of the carbon footprint goals, and the question of why is that tied to a town total versus a per capita measurement, the answer to that is kind of has a couple different reasons. The first one is the industry standard tends to be by region, so everyone else is doing it by city, not by population. That also makes sense scientifically in that the atmosphere doesn't really care if we reduce our per capita emissions, because it is the total quantity that's going to affect the Earth's atmosphere, not the per capita. And also there's some difficulty because of the variability in student population, that our population could flux more quickly year to year. So, but that was heard, and we're not doing an inventory this year. Years between doing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and then the following year we do a climate action plan. So this year's climate action plan, the next year will be another greenhouse gas inventory. And we could look at, and Todd heard that, in terms of doing a per capita alongside the bulk amount, just to give us more of a sense of, is that a useful thing for people to see? So definitely still open to it, but I think would require a little more research as to how easy it is to align the numbers that way. And then in terms of the energy checklist, the Energy Committee decided that they might consider revisiting that after the EV order, but was really interested in making it mandatory because felt really frustrated with the last example of how it was used and not getting the information around the HVAC systems and not really being able to have kind of productive conversations with the developers on that. So the thought was kind of like, unless some of those checklist items could be worked into a more guaranteed part of the process, it just wasn't a priority to be spending a lot of time on that checklist. Folks do know to send their ideas for incentives, density incentive, solar, or, all electric, geothermal, heat pump installations, smart buildings, et cetera, for Michael. So I don't know if he's gotten any, but I can remind them again on Tuesday. And then I shared the update about the minor site review committee in solar. And in terms of town council items, there are a couple things that could affect the planning board. One is that they're working on updating the salt ordinance through IMAC and Public Works. So that's exciting. It hasn't been done in about 20 years. There was a question of whether there had been some violations of best practices for manure spreading. When UNH did that recently, folks may have noticed the smell of manure around town. The Ag Commission looked into that and got more information from UNH and found that all best practices were being. August 17th is Farm Day, and there is an expanding demand for the K through 3 grades at Moharamet School. And so there was an issue where about 20 families thought they might have to move their kids from Moharamet to Mast Way. They managed to work out a solution, but they're finding that the population in those grades is bigger than was expected, and so they're having some crowding issues there. So may be looking at some school expansion down the road. But they've managed to juggle things for now, but there were some questions raised in that and the very early stages of trying to figure out what to do there.
Who is providing the answers there to these questions?
So that was a discussion that happened at the school board.
Okay.
And I was not party to that discussion. It was just one of the other counselors had shared that. Do you remember any more details from that, Heather?
No, I just remember back to the presentation we received. I think that was in the housing task
The
force.
issue,
So is that, they do that all the time. Every year it's about,
Jim Morse did that here.
yeah.
it's not that the school district's out of space for K through 3. Moharrimet was getting crowded. They wanted to shift the people, 17 or 17 families have their kids shift to Mastway, and those 17 families didn't want to. So it's an internal districting thing for the school district.
Yeah.
It wouldn't mean they would need to build new schools. It just
And they
means
still
they
have
would
their own
shift around.
capacity, according to the last report we had.
Yeah.
They have plenty of room, it's just they need to shift around. It's a bit of a COVID jump, I think.
Yes, that's what they meant
Well-
tonight's meeting, or Monday's meeting.
As
But that's-
houses resell and you get the local in different neighborhoods, the school balance gets out of whack.
That's why they have to.
And if people don't want to change, then you have empty, half-empty rooms in one school and overcrowded rooms in another school. That's, I mean,
The other thing, just, I don't know how many, half of us probably don't have kids that we have to worry about being in elementary, but the families go in knowing that may not have a
Either.
choice of which school, which elementary school they'll go into, and that a shift can be a potential. So they were able to balance it, but they did that out of the goodness of their heart. The school district has the right to try to move to either of those schools and
Predict this ahead of, just curious, like the school board, do they have any way to know ahead of time, like a few years?
they're always forecasting it.
they're looking at the 3-year-olds, so they're saying they can make it work this year, but next year those people are going to have to move.
And it's just moving
Just
to the,
looking at how many 3 and 4, unless the 3 and 4-year-olds pick up and leave town.
Which they
we don't
could.
want.
You don't know.
yeah, but that, I mean, people get upset because they don't want their kid. I mean, I had that,
Is there anything more from the council?
That's it, unless Heather wants to add anything.
You're not going to bring this up?
I was good.
Oh, well, I mean,
definition.
You're leaving that for me, are you?
The other thing that we had was the presentation from RKG of the housing analysis. So that's something else that happened on Monday. And of course, we had the committee members' approval, so that's it. As well as the zoning descriptions.
The latest version's posted now from RKG?
Yeah.
Yeah, it
It
is.
should be, I gave it to
It says final,
I
it
gave
says
to
final.
Greg. Are you up there?
It's on the website, it says
Oh,
final.
good.
All right, so the final housing needs assessment is posted on the website for anybody who'd like to review.
Can I just ask one question about the solid waste? I'm sorry. Does that include, is the solid waste, is that just coming from like our reclamation? Or is that like, I guess I have a question about composting actually.
Can you hold that till I
Yes.
cover, until I go?
Yes, sure.
Since I'm on the IMAC committee?
Perfect.
Oh.
Okay.
lovely.
I'm teeing it up.
I wanted to go really bad today, but I ended up having
All right,
to take my dog. To bed. I don't have anything.
All right, since that came up, IMAC, so we didn't meet because of Juneteenth. Did I get that name right? I think I got the name right.
It's Juneteenth.
Juneteenth, yeah. We normally would meet on a Wednesday, would have met on that Wednesday. They postponed it and they met this morning. I could not attend, but I did get copies of everything in my email. The solid waste management procedures for the town. They haven't been updated in like 15 years. Created a new version, and that deals with everything about how our trash gets handled in town.
Okay.
Okay, handled by Public Works, how it gets handled, trash recycling, the whole works. So that was, he was presented that to the I morning, and I do not know what the feedback was, since I was not there. And was the meeting actually here in this morning?
Don't they meet at Richard's house?
Well, if they had a presentation, they would probably meet. in here.
I think they might have had it here just so they could be on DCAT. So keep an eye on DCAT. It might show up in the DCAT records in the next few days.
Is that the integrated waste management?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we did not record that.
Did not record that, okay,
And Joan Randolph just joined on Zoom.
thank you. Then, so does
Can I
that
ask
answer
a
your
question?
question?
Well, I'm sort of curious. We've been trying to compost for and we've discovered we're terrible at it. And our compost pile is messy and smelly. And then we think about it and we're like, for each individual to posting is somewhat complicated. And then, so I was wondering, do you know if there's a local service or someplace that we can have pick up our compost and they would take it and they would centralize
So you
this?
can drop it at the transfer station,
Or
Or go to Mr. Fox.
Or go to
Or-
Mr.
It goes
Fox.
down your
or
way.
go to Mr. Fox.
So Mr. Fox is a service and I
Yes.
would pay some number of dollars a month
Yeah.
and they would come and pick up our compost?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Twice a month.
Mr.
And you
Can
Mr.
you get
Fox.
weekly?
You can put it in your freezer if you don't want it to get smelly and gross.
Remember,
And dump
we're just
it.
not, like, I would be fine having someone come and pick it up because then we'd feel like we're doing the right thing, but and we're not creating like a mess and.
They give you, I'm
That's
gonna
perfect.
email you the link right now.
Okay,
It
Mr.
does also
Fox.
help to have at least 2 different bins.
We have 2 and we're there.
Any other committee
Thank you.
reports? That's
I
it?
don't know, I'm sure Lisa's really happy that you let.
I've got some suggestions.
You could also probably call Sally.
Okay.
Need help. No,
Public
Sally,
comments. Do we have anyone in the public who'd like to make a comment? Any hands up in Zoom?
No.
No. Okay. Item 8, public hearing for updating the HDC ordinance. Proposed zoning amendment to update the old map and lot numbers to the current ones in the historic district ordinance requested by the historic district. Before I open the public hearing, Em, did you have any questions on this?
No,
All right,
but it was, we had the preview before it went to public hearing, so I
okay,
feel familiar with it. Thank you.
very good. Anyone else? So we're, Councilor Lund, are you representing the historic district tonight?
I am, yes.
All right. Do you have anything you'd like to mention to us before we go to public hearing?
No new information, just that, you know, a reminder that what this ordinance does is simply to update the definition of the historic district with the new map numbers. And at the last meeting, Mr. Rasmussen stated that he had independently verified that that had been done correctly.
That is correct. Yeah. All right. We ready for public hearing?
Somebody want to open?
I move that we open the public hearing.
You can't make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting my role, so I gotta figure out
I move that we open the public hearing.
Somebody had to do it. You guys were pausing too
second.
long.
Seconded by, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Do you want to vote?
Yeah, well. Sorry about that. I'm independently
Was
verified.
that a nay or a yes?
Yeah, that's, yeah, I'm in. Let's open it up.
Would anyone for the public like to speak? Is there any hands up in Zoom?
No.
Mr. Chairman, there being no members of the public wishing to speak on this matter this evening, I'll make a hearing.
Second.
Seconded by Peyton. Discussion? All in favor?
No, oh, yeah.
To close the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we, unanimous assent. Discussions, we happy with this?
I'm curious as to if we're updating this to the new tax map, and we're looking at, it's 108 and 114, right? Why do we reference in one case, the old tax map, and in another case, the former tax map?
Oh, you mean one says old and one says former?
Yeah, number 2.
Oh, it should be the same. Probably former is a better word.
Well,
But I'm
He's asking why.
Why in general?
Oh,
are
okay.
we doing
Oh, yeah, in a few places, the old tax map is referenced because only a portion of the lot is actually in the district. And the way it is delineated is it follows some old, smaller lot boundaries. And it's not surveyed, it just follows those old boundaries. So that's the only way to reference it. Odd as that may seem.
Because of various lot line adjustments.
No, I get it. I follow the why. And those old tax maps or former tax maps readily available
Yeah, we'll always have them.
online? Probably not online, right?
No, I don't think they're online. I'm not sure we want to put them online,
No.
but we have them readily available in the office.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do we have, and I could probably, and if you'll indulge me just for one more question, Mr. Chairman. Do we have a plan that's online that shows the boundary of the historic district?
Oh, yeah, the historic district map, yeah.
Is that what this is?
But I think that is, again, old map numbers, so our GIS person will, but he does have a backlog of work to do.
And it is part of the GIS because there is an overlay district on the GIS as a checkbox. Is that accurate or?
Oh, that should be accurate.
Okay,
Pretty sure, I'm almost certain, I'll check that again.
okay. Because that's what I use. I use the GIS for almost everything just because I can overlay things very easily. I just want to make sure that was,
Count on it, but I'll
Okay.
check. I'll let you, if there's anything.
Since
I'll
the GIS, so the GIS is using GPS points as opposed, actual east, west, north, south coordinates, as opposed to lot lines, right, as its underlying base. So even if it has the, what I'm saying is GIS doesn't use our lot numbers to figure out the historic district. It's using the actual linear boundaries based on GPS coordinates.
right. And then in the map it does, but in the map it does like scope the boundaries. So it looks like it is, but they're probably carving that off differently.
Well, it is following the boundaries of the the lots. Now, with the update to the tax maps that was done 2 or 3 years ago, it was more precise. I suppose it's possible some of those lot lines technically may have changed slightly, but it still followed the lot line. So your property, most of these are the entire lot, so if your property was in the historic district, still all of your properties in the historic district. Some boundary lines might be rendered great in GIS though. So the boundaries are not changed at all.
Anything else? I'll take a motion to accept.
Can I do it? I will make a motion that we accept the proposed zoning amendment to update the old mat and lot numbers to the current ones in the Historic District Ordinance. This is a request by the Historic District Commission.
And that's to formally initiate the amendment.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
So we'll pass it on to the council.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Item 9, workforce housing, potential zoning amendment, discussion about rough draft, second iteration of proposed workforce housing ordinance. All right, so we have the updated, very rough draft in front of us. And so,
Michael has some notes.
So Michael has concerns about whether we should be trying to do a scaled down amendment and then come back a second time to make it a little more robust versus trying to go with an initial robust version. As stated in the opening page here, what are people's thoughts on this?
Anybody else wants to go first? Anybody have anything?
I'm happy, however you wish.
Oh.
I do have something, but I'm happy to
You
wait.
go ahead.
I think I respectfully disagree with the notion that we ought to tailor this more toward a project that we know a developer is interested in, if that means converting it to 100% workforce housing, addressing some of the other points that come up when we expand it beyond 100%. There's been a lot of contribution, both from Look and from members here, that having a more diverse community there and not 100% workforce housing was an important benefit. And if in fact we have developers falling all over themselves to get involved and develop it, including the workforce housing component, because we have some component that is non-workforce housing, all the better. Let's have that competition, would be my view.
I have a tendency to agree with it, with Michael's suggestions, not with Tom's. I'm, all along, I have a couple of concerns about some of the numbers, like our minimum number. We originally did come forward with an amendment that was 100% affordable housing. And having conversations with people, and especially even after the council meeting the other night, I think there's an expectation that these will be workforce housing or affordability. And with that, I think is coming some lack of understanding about what that really means, affordable housing, and from all over the place. And I think that if we start to mix a number, a percentage that I'm not really comfortable where we're deciding on that percentage. Say we say 65, or what does that mean? And where are we getting that percentage? What is the criteria we're basing that on? And when you start looking at the numbers, we could end up with some very expensive units for sale. I think these should just be rental only and not, I think that there are other places in town we can address for sale. But this overlay is only going to be working at two specific areas in town. We're only going to overlay it on two pieces of property right now. I think if we brought to the community, oh, it's going to be, what does that mean? Then you're going to start crunching numbers and you're going to realize that you could have 60 market rate homes, market rate new builds could be anywhere from, for a duplex, $750,000 to a single family, single home to $1.15 million, $1.2 million. For a new build, single family home. That's what they're going for right now. Check out Zillow. Okay, for a new build. That is a lot. And I think that there's one particular, that piece of property on Route 4 is not right zoned for that kind of thing. And in this, if we have this overlay, it would make a very valuable piece of land more valuable for expensive homes. There would be still some affordable, but we also have to remember, we're including fair market rents. This area for a 2-bedroom apartment is $2,000. That is well above the workforce 60% AMI, which comes in around $1,600-1,700 for a 2-bedroom, for a family of 4. So that, I think some people are going to be still going to be $2,000 to $2,500 apartments, which is market rent around here. All right, people are going to have a hard time understanding that. I think there's going to be an explanation as to what we mean by that, because I think people are thinking you're going to create workforce, and it's only going to be workforce housing, and it's going to be cheap. It's going to be, because people even say, We don't want the quality to be less. We don't want them to be feeling like they're living in a project. No one's going to be living in a project. These are going to be well-built, and they're going to be not cheap places to live. It's still going to be $2,000 for a 2-bedroom, $2,500 up to that for a 3-bedroom, and that's this year's numbers. So I think that I like the idea of going 100% affordable, unless somebody can give me a number that's based on real data that's going to give me a percentage that makes sense. I think they should be exclusively for rent, because that's what we need in the state of New Hampshire. We need rental. We all know people can buy, and it's their pathway to wealth, but right now it's actually cheaper to rent. It's more really feasible to rent than to buy because of the interest rates and the cost. Rental units can be put up quicker and cheaper and house a lot of people that are in dire need of better housing, which would make more older units out there available to people that can't afford $2,000 a month. I certainly don't want single-family homes on their own lots, because then you're looking at $1 million homes. You're looking at $1 million homes.
But you could have a single family, a detached house. You could have a detached dwelling unit.
If you,
Right, not on its own lot.
No,
Like
no.
it's like-
That's,
Well,
That's
we
what
say,
cottage
that's
is.
right, so I just,
we do have the
need to
ability
clarify
to, part of this development, we could outright exclude single-family residences on their own lots, which would take kind of those $1 million plus probably off the table. I know that luxury townhomes can go for, really over 500,000, but without being on their own lot, it would be over $1 million in Durham. I feel a little bit like we had this conversation already, and the number we came up with 65%, because we did have differing opinions. And I remember Richard Kelly kind of taking those numbers and finding the kind of compromise.
that's our compromise point, but what does it
Well,
mean?
I hear that there are good reasons to argue in both direction. I think from the public, in terms of people who are concerned about the ordinance, we had more people concerned about the idea of it not being diverse than we had people who would say, I would oppose this ordinance if it were only 65% or 80%. I think the ordinance we've been looking at also, it doesn't exclude 100%. There's no requirement to have any market value. If someone wanted to do a proposal of 100%, that would fall under the ordinance. I also worry a little bit that if we make this too narrow in scope, then we'll not have momentum after we pass this to pass a second round. There's been a lot of time invested, resources invested. We have the housing task force. I do worry a little bit that if we pass something now and then extend it, but it's not it's something that's only a solution for one project, for more than one project down the road, then we might not get any more workforce housing after this one project. So I think that's just.
Tom?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify on this 100% fair market value issue. There is no amongst the board members that's correct, that this will be 100% fair market value. Indeed, at our last meeting, one of our members undertook to do digging into the HUD, the different HUD breakdowns, because up until the last meeting, indeed in the package for the last meeting, we were talking about something like 65% of fair market value. And the ability for the developer to fund that lower priced housing would come from the non-restricted units, whether they are rental or for sale. So I don't want us to forget about the fact that we are still openly discussing the fair market value rent issue.
This side of the table? Richard?
So I did a little deeper dive into those numbers, and as we expected, they didn't create them for us, and they didn't create it to create zoning ordinances for affordable housing. But looking at the different parameters and different numbers that they have out there, probably the best fit.
Which one?
Which?
The, well,
Fair market or
The
HUD?
the HUD fair market, yeah.
The fair market.
Can you explain that a little bit? What do you mean
No,
the
I
best
just
fit?
looked at what they had there
Right.
and just kind of shook my head, well, that ain't gonna work.
Okay.
And Tom, what I would suggest
Yep.
is don't rely on my assessment on
Yep.
that. This is a lunchtime desktop sort of thing.
So, if I may add on to that, we can require, so there's the low-income housing tax credit, then there's the vouchers. So developers, if you have a developer deal with the low-income housing tax credit, that's something they do on the front end. The vouchers are a mechanism for the back end, right? And what the is those,
Are you talking
Allow-
vouchers, are you talking about rent vouchers?
I'm talking
Or
about the
low
rent
income?
vouchers.
Okay, those are,
But rent vouchers are a way that you can support somebody who's at that 60% level and get them into a place that would normally rent for higher.
maybe, rent, there's
No,
not
that's
a lot
just
of,
but if the owner feels comfortable doing that, that's something, like you said, that's at the back. If something's built, they're the ones dealing with, it doesn't matter to us, does it? If they're gonna do that or not.
and it's also a 5-year waiting list to get a voucher right now.
Just for my own clarification, so on one side, it seems like we discussed requiring a minimum of 65% affordable units. So there's that 65%, but then I'm thinking percent of AMI? Are we
so-
talking about two different numbers right now?
That's a
Yeah.
lot of things.
Okay, because, so that 65% of affordable units, I think we vote, but we came to that average, we came to that decision that's, like, I want to say done, right? Or
I
are
wouldn't
we?
say that number is done.
Are we circling back now?
Wouldn't either.
to
That was our
we're
initial
going-
number to get started,
Yeah, I don't
so that we
agree
could
with
put
it.
a draft together.
Okay, so we're going back to both numbers right now.
Yeah. All right, so Heather,
Well,
and then Peyton.
Well, I would say that if we wanted to do the 100%, I don't think that that's, like you said, it's good for one project, but it's not good to show people outside of Durham that Durham's somebody that you can come to and work with to come up with a plan. So I don't say, 165% to 100% and maybe density bonuses for the more you put in above the 65 or something like that. But to just hard butt 100 and not go anywhere else, I don't think that that's going to be doable in the long run. And to try and push through thing for only one project just makes us a document that doesn't live, right? And I think you have to have a living document. Otherwise, why will to have, zoning ordinances we've been dealing with for 20 years, and this one's going to be for one? That just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, the hope is it's not just for one project, but that it's a certain model of ordinance that, would cover the overlay district and a number of parcels, particularly large ones. And the hope is that it's a particular approach and that there could be a few different types of developers and types of projects, or a for-profit person using the tax credit, or maybe an organization like Service Credit Union in Portsmouth. Who knows, maybe Riverwoods might be interested. So the hope is that it's a particular model that might apply to a couple different opportunities.
Peyton?
So the things I initially approved personally right away are the HUD fair market value. That seems like a very simple way to rent and adjust that. The 100%, I was initially opposed to 100% because I thought long-term it might put the developer in a position, they don't have enough flexibility to moderate their rates. And if they need to raise funds and they're looking at a 3-year out cash flow projection, they just don't have any ability to do it because things are just fixed. So 10 years out, they could get in a pickle where they basically haven't reserved enough and they don't have any flexibility. So initially for me, I was thinking that 65% sort of flexibility to adjust some things if downstream, 10 years out or 15 years out, they need to reserve additional funds. So, but Portsmouth Housing does 100%, and they seem to be able to cash flow out, and those developments last for a long time, and they seem like they're well managed.
But they're a nonprofit. So I think it's harder to achieve for-profit, and I would be worried for the same reasons you mentioned.
So that was initially concerning. I also think for maybe the vibrancy of the community, having 100% is different than having 65%, and 65% creates some economic diversity inside that, which is probably a good thing. I think it probably adds to some, probably a stronger community, but that's, I think, anecdotal.
Well, when you think of, oh, you're going, who's going next?
I wanted to observation on the fair market rent as it relates to the question of 65% or 100%. Some of us are the fact that the HUD fair market value is expensive, right? And I'm not seeing the complex of our ability to simply say, it's not 100% of HUD fair market value, it's 85% of HUD fair market value. There's no mystery to that that's hard to come at or discover or uncover. And the ability to tie what percentage of the housing at the 85 as opposed to 100, tying that to how many of the units are done at full fair market, real fair market value, right? Gives the flexibility to bring in that lower income to address the concerns about just how high HUD fair market value is, and the flexibility for the developer that, who is hiding in the background that we're all a little bit worried about. What happens 3 years down the road if they need to adjust that cash flow? I think it's not complicated.
I just have one. I thought that we were going to go with the HUD at 60%, so some units would be higher at the 100%, and some might even be lower than the
At fair market?
60%. So, yeah.
Well, if we got HUD fair markets are set at bedroom size.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're just set at bedroom size. So if you can only afford 1,500, then you get one bedroom. If you can afford 2,900, you get a 4-bedroom.
Whether you wanted it, you wouldn't necessarily.
And that choice, I mean, there are families of 4 that live in 1 bedroom because that's all they can afford.
But it's still a number. I'm just saying, it's a fair number.
It's
It
a
allows
number.
for both ends of the spectrum.
I
I
guess
don't know how else you're going to be able to do it, because that's sort of what is used around. I mean, if you look
It's
at
what-
other towns, you look at New Hampshire, this is what they're getting. I mean, keep it simple and use the document that's there and stick to the 60%, which allows people the choice of where they can fit into those homes.
You have me
Dwelling
confused, the
units.
60% of what? There's one which is what percentage of the complex makes it this affordable, and then the other is what constitutes affordable.
Right.
One's the rent and the other's the percentage of the complex.
So
Correct.
percentage of the complex, the other one, I think right now, I'm hearing 60 over and over.
60% is the AMI for
So 60
HUD
is
rents.
the amount of
Yes.
money,
Yeah, that's
65 is the amount of
It's
units.
Rents are set
Yeah.
at 60% of average medium income for the area, and that is for a 3-person family.
Adjusted for a family of 3.
Yeah. And so that's for a 2-bedroom total.
That's not the number we
no.
went with in our
Yeah,
draft.
affordable rent is.
Yeah, well, the
1,800.
advantage of using the HUD, there's the HUD fair market rents, and then there's the 60% AMI, and they're different. The advantage of using the HUD fair market rents is that they're clean, they're official from HUD. Now, they're higher, and I asked people who know, the people in New Hampshire Housing and others, well, what are they equivalent to for AMI? And they couldn't really give. They said they're higher than 60% AMI, but they're lower than 100% market. So I don't know what they are, 80, 85, 90%. But the advantage of them is when Peyton says, I think rightfully so, well, how do we know that this is financially viable? The good thing about them is they're a little high. That's helpful for the developer, but they're still, relatively affordable. And the reality is, a lot of people are paying well over 30% of their income. They're paying 40, and some are paying 50%, which is unfortunate, but at least they're in housing.
The complicated issue is things, and we throw out like, well, there's LIHTC. Those are still on a competitive basis, and you only get so many at a time. Build, I got my LIHTC, I'm going to go in and build this. No, you apply for this year, you might get some, and you'll get enough to cover a certain amount, $1,000 worth. That might cover a project, like something like excavation or something like that. next year and compete again. You may not get them the following year. So LIHTC, that is a bidding process that may or may not be available. So we can't just say, oh, they'll just get LIHTC. It's not going to cover 100% at all. And to think that LIHTC or any credits are going to cover 100%, you still believe in Santa Claus. It's not going to happen. So there's a lot of money involved in building units. And if you want to
So
go
I think we're
HUD,
getting off track here, though.
well, I'm still talking about this process. So I'm just, in defending it, the HUD fair market rents them a little bit more wiggle room to rather than the 60% AMI, average median income, a little bit lower.
Which I thought we weren't using,
We are not, and I wouldn't agree to
right?
that.
And I didn't see anywhere here where that was even in being proposed, so we got on it.
Well,
yeah,
because I
there's-
thought we had
That's what I'm saying,
discussed
we're
it.
off track.
Well, there's some-
We keep arguing about what our rent levels is. I haven't heard anyone say they didn't want to use fair market rents.
I thought Tom
I
was
did.
against it.
Yeah, I
And
remember
we
it
had
from-
we had a discussion about it last week, and so, yes.
So I just
Okay.
want to comment is we're concerned about affordability now. But we have people that want to go 100%, whereas if we went with the 65 affordable units, it'd still be 130 dwelling units that we would need, and would be detached dwelling units,
I
in
wouldn't-
theory.
Correct.
Do we really want to
Correct.
see 70 single-family homes? The
Family
area
homes.
that it's in. I mean, we had to take into consideration, if this was just an amendment, or just this
Saying
has to
that those would
pertain
be
to,
luxurious homes, I think that those could be cottage clusters. I'm just saying that
Well, then we would need
whatever
to-
they would end up being, we're allowing profit, where we would be encouraging the developers, or they could have more density and get higher up in this affordable
Then
unit section.
we're going to have to not allow single-family homes. We're going to have to allow single-family to purchase in multifamily. So your fourplexes, your fiveplexes that are to purchase condominiums. If otherwise, if we are looking at allowing a developer in 70 single-family homes based on just these numbers of one lot that we are thinking of.
But I think that-
Because we know the pieces of property that we're putting these on.
This comment was made by Michael, and he's the one that would mean 70 single-family houses. But that same developer may not price units into that, they might put that into townhomes. We don't know, because they're the ones to come up with a project to bring to us that they viable, based on the 65-35 or 75-25 or whatever it is.
And we could restrict this to not allow for any single-family homes on their own lots.
Is there
Or
a
any
consensus on that
single-family
point, at
homes,
least?
if we
would
Is there
have to.
consensus on that? Like no single-family homes on their own lots? Because that would be helpful.
I'm okay with it. I think it was Paul last time that raised the flexibility of having that, again, for the purpose of funding capability for the developers.
I think the issue with saying, does that mean you're okay with duplexes on their own lots?
Yeah, we're only talking about a single-family house on its
Okay.
own lot.
And
If they split these lots that we put the overlay on,
well,
wouldn't they have to come?
Well, that's a good question.
What we're doing, so if we're, let's keep in mind that if we allow single-family homes on their own lots, they're going to have to be on town roads. That's going to be one of the things we'll have to make
Well,
sure.
they'd have,
of
or will we
the
also allow it on private street? They'd have it on a street with a right-of-way,
So,
which they're probably not going to do anyway.
no, the point I'm making is, let's say you have nobody in their right mind, and we should not be setting up so that somebody who doesn't know better comes in, would come into a situation where you're buying a single-family house on your own lot, on a private road, which, guess what? That means now where you've got some sort of HOA thing going on, maybe even condominium type get up because we have to share road costs and such. If it's a private road, trash is going to be
Has
shared.
to be picked up.
It's going to have to be picked up. all right? And the big ape in the house with the 70% of the units controls the entire HOA.
Yeah.
It just adds complexity, it would add complexities
So,
The rent-
to allow.
You know, so if it was a
It wouldn't.
situation where you had single-family houses in there, I would think they'd have to be on public road, or they would be situated at the edge so that they would have separate access than the other units, which is kind of a way of what we're, not what we were intending here.
that's fine. I want us not to confuse completely separate issues. One issue is it 100% workforce housing? Or is there some component of true fair market value in it? It has nothing to do with what that is. They could all be two-bedroom rental units, right? And there's still the issue, is
Yeah,
it 100%
these are all
or not?
separate and independent,
Right?
these half
These
dozen
are-
things.
Right?
And they could all be
And-
rentals for that matter.
And to
They could all be
me,
rentals.
that question comes down to, if we are concerned about a developer's ability to do them, we're trying to find enough revenue for the developer to do the project, are we putting the burden of that revenue on the low-income people, making sure that the rents on the low-income people are high enough that the project can be done 100% low-income? Or are we solving that revenue problem by having some portion of it be affordable housing, so that the burden of getting to that revenue number doesn't affordable housing people, it falls on the fair market value people who are going to buy, who are going to pay full rent for it. And I, for one, would be in favor of having that burden who are not the affordable housing people, and get the affordable housing down as inexpensive as we can. That's step one to me.
But it's not like if you have, market, that you're going to allow them to bring the rents down, because there seems to be a consensus that whatever is affordable is going to be set at HUD fair market.
No,
So you're not going to be bringing to 50% AMI or 30% AMI.
No,
I don't think there is that
I have a
consensus.
question of what he's saying.
Rob was next.
Sorry.
I think the HUD fair market value, you need some number to start with. So if we assume that's the number, then we want to spread the cost across as many renters as possible. So a mechanism to do that is the density bonus. So if someone says, I'm willing to include more lower cost rents, say at the 85 or 65%, then the density bonus is spread that cost across more people. So a density bonus is, I think, the lever that we should be. We can argue about what's the lever is, what's the bonus is that gets you to spread it across. And I think that might be the mechanism we're not pulling right now.
Way to do it.
Yeah.
The other way to do it is to leave the density number wherever we've chosen it, and allow a portion of the units to be burdened by whatever percentage, 100% of HUD fair market value, 80% of HUD fair
60,
market
whatever.
value, 60, whatever it is, not be burdened by that, and to bring it in through that action. And so now we're not putting the community burden on overdensity. We are, we're solving that problem at the same density level with some true fair market value units.
Sally?
But I think our central question is, where is the cash coming from to fund it, right? And maybe I'm missing some of the, if we don't want to do the sale, then we need to
They're going to have higher
find
rents.
additional,
So
they're going to have higher
on the
rents.
35% of the units, they're going to have higher rents because they're not subject. The HUD fair market value is below true market. So even if we did 100% of HUD fair market value, the 35% would be higher than, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. If it was true fair market value, we wouldn't be allowing this development and the density benefits simply to have a lot more housing.
Okay, so just so I understand the math, so what you're saying is, on that, it's the 65-35 split on the affordability,
On whether they are on whether they have to all qualify as affordable or not,
right, okay.
right?
So you're saying some of them do not have to qualify as affordable?
Those
Now-
bring in additional money
Right.
to the developer.
Now,
Right.
see, two things. That's where I think the community will have a problem, because we're selling this as an affordable housing. And I think that some people say, oh, you're going to let expensive houses come in. On Rob's point, I like what he's suggesting, what he's saying, because first of all, I think 65% is, I think it needs to be, if we're going to give a split of, it needs to be at least up to like 80, it needs to just be higher. But the density bonus, if you're going to build 100%, if you're going to build affordable, you're going to build all these affordable units, and we're going to give you a number, 80%. I'm using that number because I'm more comfortable with that number. 80%. You're going to build these 80% affordable-ish unit, and they're going to be based on fair market. You're going to accept vouchers. You may consider doing some income averaging when it comes to figuring this out, so you can let some lower people in. And what are your options as a property management? Well, how are you going to your leases? We're saying this. If you can get some lower, great. To get 20% at going rate, you can for doing something maybe a little bit more, like bringing in some that are cheaper for,
Yes.
but so that if you got to go market rate, those are still going to have to be high density, duplexes at a minimum, high density homes, not single family homes on single family lots, and they need to be, build as many, get them in as tight as you can for that. I think that you got to realize how many single-family homes you could get when you're looking at the properties. We know what properties we're looking at. We know the acreage involved, so we can do the math on figuring how many units would be out there. But we need as much affordable that can be called affordable. As I don't think the community is going to give us a bunch of cheap apartments, and then you're going to allow $1 million homes to be built. I think some people are going to have a problem with that. I mean, I don't think there's people on the council I think they're sometimes even thinking, oh, it's going to be cheap rents. I don't think people even realize how expensive cheap rent is now.
It's going to be better than it is now, cheap. Durham's never going to be.
It's never going to be cheap.
All right.
Okay.
Richard?
Yeah, so we're talking about rents, right? And the matter on the table is, because we recognize that the sale of the house is going to be problematic. So the easy way out is, what's on the table right now is just rents. How much more is compared to the fair market rent? 1.5 at best? I mean,
Okay.
maybe?
Okay.
And where I'm going with this is, I don't think it changes all that much your payback time. Because you're making a capital investment to build these units. And if 35% of them are making X plus 0.5X, 1.5X of that monthly, is it going to really wind back that payback time?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if the assumption is that at 100% qualifying houses, and qualifying houses being all at 100% of HUD fair market value, then if there was 35% instead, 1.5% HUD, half of that remaining 70, not quite 70%, but 35 on the other side of that coin could actually be at 50% of HUD fair market value. And the revenues would be the same as if it was 100% at 100%. So if what we're trying to do is create truly affordable housing, and subsidizing that with some real fair market value housing in the mix is important.
I guarantee that's going to do that.
So running off of what Tom just said, the proper way to try to allow that isn't by saying 100%, 100%. It's saying the average of all units will fall within 100% of fair market rate. That allows the renter to then balance and
They
use
can
whatever
balance them out.
percentage.
Yeah.
And that the entire average of the development comes out at that level. for every expensive one you'll have,
get there.
somebody's getting a break.
Well, that's income averaging. They do that in
But
many
what
of
would-
the units
And
around.
I'm not, that's an interesting idea, but what would be the incentive for the developer, or the person to rent below market value? What's the
Well-
incentive for them to bring in someone that's, would they, let's say they had 20% that were going at 1.5, then that would force them to have some other lower portion that would be going below the fair market rent because they
They could-
average it out.
There's a reason why they do it already, if you don't mind me answering.
Go ahead.
There's a reason why, that happens in the industry now. Developments that are built with LIHTC or any kind of grant, any kind of credit, when they buy credits, they have compliance. They have to comply to certain standards. And so their compliance is going to be 60% AMI. So they have this number they have to be renting at, 60% AMI. What they do is they will say, I can get that by income averaging or by rent averaging out my building. So I'm going to be, I can rent this one, he's 2,000. That allows me to rent to this one who can only pay 500. And it balances out at 60% through the whole building. And that's why people do it. That's what they do. They average. So the same apartment, they'll have somebody come in who can afford 2,000 and it's willing to 2,000. Then they have somebody coming in who can only pay 500, and they rent to that and then they average it out, and the higher and the lower comes out at a total of 60% AMI rents.
But
That's what they do with the management. But that gets really complicated, and that isn't something we can determine. That's something that a developer is going to be looking at if they're getting any kind of credits. That's what they're going to be looking at. That's not our realm. We could say average, but I think we have to come up with if we're not going to do 100%, we need to come up with a number that's as high as we can accept for fair market rents. And if we want to include to purchase, we need to think very hard about what kind of to purchase we're looking at. If they be connected townhouses or they be garden style condominiums, that's still ownership. It doesn't need to be a single family home.
But on that, so it's an interesting idea. You're right, it's complicated. Then all of a sudden the town needs to go and do an audit once a year and say, okay, you have 200 units and now give us the total rents of that, but somewhere that's kind of complicated. And then you have to go and you have to somehow quantify that and say, okay, now you've averaged it out. Whereas if you just say your market rent, show us the number of rents that are at fair market rent, and they say, okay, there are 100 units, here's 65, or here are 85 that are at that, the others, that's the easy calculation.
They may have accepted vouchers here and there.
If
But we don't care
if
what
I may,
the-
I don't think it's that difficult, and we can make it really, really, really easy and just not. The more we tailor it to meet our goals, the more complicated it's going to be by definition. There's no reason why the town's audit right cannot be outsourced to a third person, and there's no of this arrangement. The developer is required to fund whatever it is, $20,000 a year from the funds to pay the auditor who will come in and audit it, right? These things are not insurmountable.
Well, this is a new foray for the town. It's very complicated, as you can see. I really recommend that it be relatively simple. And, I think what is wise that communities will often do is they will adopt an ordinance and they set certain thresholds. We did this when we changed the downtown regulations. You set something, and if we don't get a response from the market in a year, we talk to developers and we adjust it. Now, Tom, maybe some kind of adjustment and escalation and encouraging people to be 50% AMI, maybe all of that's good, but to try to figure that out now And it would take us, to really get the calibrate numbers right, it's just a lot of work. And I don't think I just think it's a much bit fairly simple. We know what at least one developer has done, that has worked. Keep it relatively simple. And in a year, this isn't working, or no one's bitten. Talk to some developers, and they might say, you know what, I would do some 50 AMI if I get a density bonus. But start, simple and 100%, and then if we find it's not inducing people, then make it 80%. But start at 70%, you're giving away a lot up front, maybe too much. Start at 100%, and if nobody bites, then you can come down.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at the flip side. I think we're giving up too much to the developer, not to the person who's renting. So your point is that if we can't rent them at 100%, then we come back and revisit it?
We also have to look at the density.
We'll rent them at 100%.
We're not renting.
They will rent at 100%, since by definition, 100% of HUD is they'll rent. We're not going to not have renters. So there's not going to be anything to come back and revisit.
Well, the numbers have to work for the developer. Though.
Right.
What I'm saying is, if nobody wants to build anything, then we come back. If no projects approach
But
us.
I guess I'm proposing that we make it more, that we,
We're
I
not
think
going
I've said
to,
my, I think
All right,
I've said my share.
so we've been on this for 45 minutes or so. So let me try to bullet it down to a couple of easy questions, and we'll get a consensus. Well, consensus is easy.
Fingers
crossed.
And then everybody, but the people who don't get their way got to accept it,
Well, then let's go back to last week. I'm sorry.
right?
get a
So
consensus.
where we left off last week was, was that 65% of the dwelling units would be affordable, and that
at fair market.
at fair market, we only cared about fair market rent. So first off, let's start with our definition for affordable is fair market rent. Everybody's still on board for that, right?
I am.
They're tied together.
Yes.
I think for the time being I am, but I'm not married to it.
Okay. Real question is, do we want to pass work on something that is only allowing 100% affordable? Or do we want to go with something that is more tiered and allows less than 100% affordable?
Can I make one just minor point on that?
Yeah.
So what if there was like a middle ground where it was another bonus for this and another bonus for that? Let's say
That's
there were
what a tiered value would be.
Yeah.
So, and those were carrots so you could get to 100%, and then for the 100%, there would be something that would be significantly beneficial to the town or to the residents that could be helpful, whether it was master plan,
Right.
appropriate.
And that would be, and that's the purpose why we're asking about density bonuses, and if we get some density bonuses, then we can set up a tiered event. Of course, if nobody comes forward with density bonus ideas, we won't have a choice.
Yeah.
So there will only be one option.
I guess I would, and I don't want to interrupt, I know I am, sorry. But if there was if you get the density bonus, and then there may be one or two other carrots that we could add there that would get you to 100%, where then, okay, we've now satisfied the 100%, because I think the goal, I heard loud and clear, was people need housing, when there were 30 people here saying they need housing. So if you could get it to 100%, and there were some carrots that were beneficial to the town, I would be inclined to go that route.
I would agree with
Right.
if you're going around, I would agree with what he just said. I would love to see 100%, but I would go, the lowest I would go is 85% with incentives to get you up to 100.
All right, Erica said yes. I
So
wasn't
I
sure what you were
said less
saying.
than 100%. And I think that, there was a lot of people that I think were interested in the affordable housing, but there were also a lot that through various forms of communication, I think they communicated that they wanted a bit of differences in between, like the different types of housing, like a bit of,
You can have different types and still have it be affordable.
when it comes to like income.
All right, Richard.
So
you-
that's what I'm addressing.
So I've got three tallies I'm counting. I've got tiered, 100%, and less than 100%, meaning it'd be less than 100%, but not necessarily tiered.
Can you, explain tiered a little bit more?
Tiered is you get density bonuses if you build whatever we say the minimum has to be.
Isn't that the same as less, or just a permutation of less? Because I'm okay
It's-
with that, right? That's
it's
a
a per-
permutation of less.
So,
So
so
put me
what the
down for that
draft
one.
says
Yeah.
right now, if you look at the draft right now, paragraph E says at least 65% of the dwelling units need first housing units, and we don't have any tiers. We don't have any density bonuses yet that are in here. We're just saying it has to be at least 65%. That would be less. One, of course, is 100%. And then tiered is, I'm not going to start at 100%. We're going to start somewhere lower, but then if you do extra things, you can get more bonus. Or you're allowed to drop down from 100% to a lesser percentage, might be another way of thinking about it. We start at 100%, but you get a bonus, if you do something, you get a bonus and you're allowed to go down 10% or something like that.
Maybe you go to
All right,
50%
so,
and higher. Something.
because the reason this is important is we'll revisit this every other meeting until we decide on what the actual thing's going to look like.
If we're willing to put in the time to then describe what the bonus is and the tier and that's going to take time, then I'm okay with that one. That's where my tally would go.
So, Richard?
The question on the table is just simply the percentage of affordable units.
Yes.
Or tiering it in some way.
Or-
I'm up for something less than 100%. I'm open to a tiered unless it gets painful.
Heather?
Yeah, I agree. I think that last week you guys talked about simplifying and not asking for all of these things. It's no different than the number of units, right? Oh, we want to have 101 bedrooms. Don't get into the details, but up with a formula, I think less than 100, and a range that allows, I personally think and agree that density is what they're going to want, because you get most money out of your material and labor costs.
You're tiered.
I'm a tiered. I'm 100% if there's enough votes for that, but I'm tiered otherwise.
I'm open to tiered, but I'm not comfortable with 100% because I think what I remember from public hearing is and this is the sociology training in me, is that diversity is important in communities.
Agree.
Tom?
I'm tiered. I hear Emily, I'm not sure that I agree that the tiering should go all the way to 100%. And for me, the benefit back to the town of that tiering, right, if they give us more, then it's to make the affordable units more affordable.
I'm tiered. We do this across our society. Healthy people subsidize people who are needing medical care, whatever that scenario is, and this is another version of that. And I think it's got precedent in a lot of places. And the higher rents are subsidizing the lower rents.
Right.
All right. So,
Again, I think I was counted, but
yeah,
You're the one who created tiered.
you created tiered.
the tier with some sort of incentive, and then there are, open space questions there, and then whether there would, if you went to 100%, maybe there would be something available for the town that could be in some space or something, I don't know. Some possibilities
Details.
like that.
There's some,
Details on the tier.
There's several details on the tiering. What's our maximum level that we're going to, what's a so
I have a question.
what's the things to think about? I'll be right with you. What's the minimum we'd ever want to go? What's the maximum we would ever want to require, which could be less than 100%, right? And exactly how many tiers, how many incentives do we have to go in between? How do we work that list to numbers?
How about 80, 90, and 100%?
Well, I don't want to answer those now. I want people to think about them.
Heather had a
And until we have actual on the table, I don't think we can really be talking about them. Heather?
I think that spending a lot of time trying to figure out what our incentives are, besides maybe just saying density, is to have like 3 bullets and have the developer come with what they would provide for more units or whatever. Because the more detail we get in, again, we're trying to design for the developer. And it may be that, you know, he can give us a part, say, no, I'm gonna give you Y, whatever. And if we just start to do all of these things, saying what these things are, we don't know what anybody would offer. I think that they know more about what they can provide. And if we are interested in it, we're interested in it. And if it's a back and forth and a negotiation, as what's his name from Dover, which I could never remember his name.
Ryan Pope.
Ryan Pope. I'm really bad with names. It takes me like a year. I think that allows for that dialogue. If we keep trying to put all of this stuff in writing, except maybe the sentence, you know, anything between 80 and blah, we need to get up to this amount of units or whatever, and just kind of give that guideline, but don't keep trying to come up with them.
I
Although
think
I do, in the end, it's going to be done on a spreadsheet. And I like the idea of 80, 90, 100, just as numbers to pull, and it's loaded in the spreadsheet, because then you got an adjustment that you can do on the rent piece, and then the developer is going to sit there and go, what would happen if I did? 90% is going to drive it in the end. There's going to be some things that are really hard to value, but I think the math will be the big driver. I think the open space piece is another thing that, depending on where this lands, we look at it and we say, okay, what are that are so great about this place that we don't need open space? So if you have connectivity and those kind of things, that you can more in a place that's right next door to the public park, because the public park is available and it's public lands. If this was directly adjacent to a giant conserved area, that would be open space. It's not on the private property, but it's available. So I just think that the green space piece is another lever that we can think about.
As an incentive
I think
to
that's
give them,
Yeah.
To Heather's point, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think we could talk about all these incentives, and then you get down to what's in this. And the developer's probably more creative, and they have more skin in the game than we do, and they're putting more thought into this than, you know, and we're thinking about this, but they're putting their dollars and they're borrowing money, and they've got a lot of things at risk here. So I think to allow them to be creative in the process, and if it's like a very reasonable way to go, if we did have maybe some incentives to get them to 100%, and then if they came and they said we could, you know, if you said 100% and someone shows up and they say, well, we can do 100%, that's probably a victory. I think 100% is very difficult to do, but maybe they can do it. So to Michael's point, if you could put it out there, and we could put it out there in a structured way that tries to provide some incentives for the town that would allow them to get there, and then if someone does that, then you kind of have a sort of move that number down until it got to a point where that would make sense for someone.
So this is a question. This is zoning, right? Are we able to create zoning that basically says, come in and negotiate with us? Don't we have to put it down in writing?
The easiest tiering or incentives is hard numbers. You know, for example, if you said, 80, 90, 100%, you got 80% affordable. If you go to 90%, then your overall densities increase 20%. If you go to 100%, your densities increase an additional 20%. Or I think you were talking about, or if you rent at 80% of the HUD fair market value, then you get, that's another way. Now, I don't know if that's doable, but those are the two things I'm hearing. And those you can do that with numbers. With open space, amenities, adding a sidewalk, you can't really give a number on that. So, you could have some language that, here's your density, but if a developer is willing to do certain additions pertaining to additional open space, sidewalks, green space, blah, 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 then the planning board may allow up to an additional 25%, case by case. So that's a little negotiation. But if John Randolph is still here, you may be able to have a real developer giving you some feedback on some of this discussion. I don't know if he's with us, if you want to hear from anybody.
I mean, he's got experience in it.
He might be able to just give you some general guidance
Does anyone
about.
want to hear from John? Do we have a question for John?
I'd love to hear from him.
Is John still out on Zoom?
Yes, he is.
Would he like to speak?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's been a very interesting,
Oh, John, we can't see you on camera.
you want to see me? That's, here we go, how's that?
Oh, it might be us.
It's on our end.
It's us. Oh, that's fine. We
You
can
look
hear.
great, John.
Yeah, just keep talking.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Listening to everyone's ideas tonight, it certainly gave me some ideas on how to balance some of those opportunities out. I mean, from a developer, it's a very mathematical process. There's everything from bringing water and sewer to a property to the school impact fees to the cost of these things. And when you add them up, you divide by the number of units that you build and you determine what you can rent that property for, as well as going to the bank and saying, does this property cash flow enough that you'll actually finance it? So all these factors are rolled in. We're finding that the HUD fair market, an interesting number, some of you tonight talked about what is fair market. I saw a fair market one-bedroom project go in recently at $2,500 being a fair market number. And if you looked at the HUD fair market over the last 4 or 5 years, it's taken significant jumps in an attempt to catch up with where rents are in the area. I can tell you, I think it's been brought up several times, that the other thing to keep in mind is that the HUD fair market's going to go up 3% or 5% every year in order to allow a developer to maintain and manage a project also. So that number's with expenses in the future, so it's not like it's a fixed number. So I think those are some of the things that you might want to just keep in mind, that keeping it in that park of 60% AMI, using the HUD fair market. The unfair part about this is that it doesn't really, the other side of this doesn't translate into number of bedrooms and number of income providers in a home. So if you have 2 people in a home making $25 an hour, they afford a $2,500 3-bedroom. If you got a single parent making $25 an hour, that's going to be an extreme struggle. And those are developing affordable housing and trying to make it work for everybody involved. So I don't know if I'm completely off target or not with what you're looking for input. There's a manageable tool here that you can target 60% AMI and maybe allow a developer to go a little bit above 60% AMI for some people and below for other stair step that would be easily managed for the town.
Can we ask a question? So, John, I think that what we're talking about, do you think if at that 80, 90, 100, do you think something like that would be a feasible number for a developer, 80%, and then you, with a bonus, 90%? I mean,
I think that you brought it up earlier. I think if you targeted 60% and use the HUD fair market, and maybe you brought some of the units below the HUD fair market, say a lower number, as one of the gentlemen brought up tonight, and then some of the number would go above that number. Average at the end of the year, all you'd have to do is take the total number of units divided by the rent, rent, and you'd know if you met HUD fair market or not. So if you had 200 units divided by the total number of rent, you would know if the average was that HUD number or not. It wouldn't take a tremendous amount of auditing or whatever to do that and stuff. So I think that the idea is a very clever idea of having a set number of units that maybe target slightly below that, number of units that are above that. That gives your project a little bit of diversity, but at the end of the day, it still allows the developer to budget offering the HUD fair market total number of allowable units.
do you think an 80% affordable is too high, or?
I personally don't. Our Dover project is 100% HUD fair market. And we do have people in there that we've dropped that number below that number. We're not collecting the full 1582 from some people because their income just can't do it and everything else and stuff. There are opportunities to do that, but if I don't have any ability in the Dover project to charge above the HUD fair market to make it up, if I did it the other way around, if you develop that was pretty clean, and said at the end of the year, all of your rents need to average that HUD fair market. If you allow some above and some below, then you'd have flexibility. And I don't think the project would be hard to maintain or manage as far as making sure that the developer knows what they can budget to.
Have higher rents, then you could say have more flexibility to say rent to are on a fixed income and good are not going to, may only make $2,000 a year or a month. So is that kind of thing where you could?
The problem that we're having right now, just to be honest with you, is that we're getting people applying for our Dover project that are making over $100,000 a year. And that wasn't the project. The target of the project was $55,000 to $65,000. So we're turning a lot of people away that are making, closer to the AMI, but they just can't find affordable units in the area or units period in the area. So there is a pretty tough span between say 55,000 and 85 to 100,000 that are having a hard time finding housing that fits the size of their family, fits their economic situation.
That's interesting.
Yeah, can I ask a question? John, do you think, some of the discussion has been to encourage diversity, like in income. I wonder if an ordinance said that for all the rental units, there must be, the average rent must not exceed HUD fair market rent. And if it said at least, say, 20% of the overall units must be rented at not to exceed 75, 80%. So you've got a number that are really kind of, low, moderate, and then you would have to have, high to offset it. And that would require that diversity. Could be very interesting.
Yes.
Would that be a reasonable thing to do in your opinion?
I think so. I think the other thing though is these projects tend to create diversity in themselves. We have, just under 40 units full in Dover, and we have people that are making, $45,000, $50,000, and they're spending 50% of their income on a unit, but they couldn't find anything cheaper. And we've got other people that are making, postal workers that are making a lot more than that, or other employees that are making more than that. And so you create diversity by how many incomes are in the house. There's so many factors that go into it. It becomes fairly naturally diverse. I think the other thing is you could stair step this so you could allow some at 50%, some at 70%, kind of target it out that way and not create a huge mathematical audit issue. If that's what I would say. I know brought up, a $20,000 audit. The problem with affordable housing is that there isn't a lot of extra money to throw around doing audits and those sort of things. We got to be smart and informed about it.
I think that's why the target of 100 actually worked, if we figured out that some of the units were going to be lower and some of the units were going to be higher.
Yeah, so, building off of what Michael partially threw out there anyway, right? So said that a minimum of 20% of the units needed to be rented at the state's 60% I rate, right? And the whole project had to average out to 100%. Then that sort of people that go crazy with their own spreadsheets year to year and create that mix that works.
A question for John Randolph. Do you accept Section 8 vouchers in your housing project?
Currently, we don't have any. It doesn't mean we don't have any. I do have one Section 8 in the main house up there, the 3-bedroom. So we are open to it. But currently, none of the tiny homes in Dover have Section 8.
And is that something, does that affect your income at all, or place, whatever you would be getting for your market rate?
So what the voucher does is individual can afford to pay and what we're charging. So if we charge like $1,582, whoever's giving the voucher would determine from an income analysis $700, and the voucher would be for the rest of that amount.
And I believe, John, those I'm under the impression that those vouchers as to how far up they will cover is based on HUD fair market, is it not? Do you know that? I think,
Actually,
that's
the
right.
Section 8 is exceeding market right now because they're having such a hard time
Getting people in.
getting people to take Section 8 vouchers and stuff like that because there's such a strong market. So they are either at or above the HUD fair market.
oh,
And actually in Dover, I theoretically would have to turn down part of the voucher to keep my commitment to Dover based on HUD.
oh, wow.
But I think Section 8 should be a part of the income discussion as well in this, because I think that's something that's really interesting to learn. And maybe also requiring, though, that any developers accept Section 8, because I've heard that it's a real problem to find landlords who will accept Section 8. That's a burden on people. So that, I think it could make sense to require
Yeah,
that.
I put that in the ordinance. I agree, yeah.
And I have one more thing, sorry for jumping back in. There was a comment earlier about LIHTC, and I just want to make sure LIHTC is extremely competitive right now to the point that you'd have to promise 3% AMI and as well cater to one of their special needs groups, veterans or other groups. And so the LIHTC is really so competitive today, I would say that it would be extremely tough to get a LIHTC for.
Okay.
Where is the 30% AMI in this ordinance?
It isn't.
It's not.
And what does it mean again?
Percent of AMI. AMI is area mean income. And this is one of those really things where it gets
We have a lot of
weird.
numbers.
So if when you talk about somebody who is at the 30% level of, what you do is you don't take what AMI is and multiply it by 30%. What because the median income is based on the household count. So you're looking at the number of households that are at the bottom, you cut the number in half basically, bottom 15% of income generating households.
How does it relate to this ordinance?
It
Now we're gonna have an income.
doesn't.
It doesn't.
Unless, because,
Nothing in here.
since we're using fair market rentals,
You don't need to-
you don't need to worry about it. The 60% AMI rentals level, right? So if you go into the HUD numbers and you take a look at what that 60% AMI HUD rental level is, that would be your 60% point, the 60% AMI. Which represents the bottom 30% of income households. Yes.
If I may, I thought there was still an open topic of whether we were going to impose income requirements on our residents.
Oh, well, that's a separate topic.
Isn't that that they would?
No, that's a topic we haven't talked about.
I know we
need
haven't
to
talked
come
about
back
it, but
to-
isn't that where this would come in, that they couldn't be
Yeah,
above?
so
60?
that would,
Yes.
that would circle back in at that point.
It could be approaches that, because he was talking about he's got 100 people earning a lot of money. How do you income your people, for your people coming in, and what is your decision process when it comes to who you accept and who you don't?
We do an application that, they turn in their pay stubs and we do that, a complete check on what they make. We've kind of kept our focus on 60% AMI, and we've actually told some people that they kind of overqualify for the project. It's kind of a hard line that we haven't drawn an exact number and everything, but we really based it on the need. We were honestly selecting from at this point, over 100 applications. So we're targeting, 60% AMI, and we kind of stay focused on that number.
And so that would be your criteria, like, oh, look, these people fall within that, so they're going to be who we are accepting, because you have this deal with Dover, you have
Dover doesn't income qualify their
No,
renters.
well, he
has to meet HUD numbers.
His rents have to meet a certain level. Who's paying the rent doesn't matter to Dover.
they're still looking at pay stubs and their ability to pay and what they're making.
Yeah.
Versus if you've got somebody who's making, 150,000, you're probably saying, you're over our limit, so sorry, but you'll have to keep looking. Is that how it works?
See, another advantage, the way Dover does it,
Oh, he's-
you
he's
can
just-
be,
John was answering.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that is the way, we don't have to show, we don't have to turn anything into the city of Dover on what someone makes. We have to show that our leases and what they are actually charged for. That's, if we get audited, we get audited off our leases. So, 100% right, that we don't have to track the income side, we track the actual what we're renting. It's more a sense of purpose of what the project is about.
So,
And you're allowed to turn someone away, I'm sorry, but you make too much money. They can accept that without calling their lawyer up.
We haven't had a lawyer called on us so far. That does eventually be, called on the carpet for it, but it's really meant to be targeted at 60% AMI. I think that's people, and most people understand that really well.
And it is completely legal to discriminate financially in this country. There is no rules.
Tom?
And I would just, again, understanding we haven't gotten back to it yet, even though Dover doesn't require it, all developers are going to be as ethical as we are hearing here.
Right.
And the fact that it is not difficult to police and that he's doing it, I think, is very informative to us.
can I just ask, could one model be, and I think it was sort of outlined, could one model be that that on average, it's 100% of the HUD fair market value, but that, let's say, 20% of the units need to be at 80% or less of HUD fair market
Yeah, I think
value.
he said, yeah.
And then at that point, then some other percentage are going to be more than HUD fair market value, but at the end of the year, when it's it's
All
just
comes
leveled
out to
out.
that, right.
And then it's the question of what's that percentage, let's say 20%, that need to be at 80% or less. And it's up to the discretion of the developer who is ever doing this. He could have some at 50% HUD fair market value. He'll just need to make that up if he wants on the other side, but he doesn't need to. It just needs to be at or below HUD fair market value for all the units. And I would just keep it HUD fair market value and not introduce an
Yeah.
additional AMI. I just
I
have
like
one rate.
I think if he copied that sentence and we
Yeah.
just left it nice and simple, that whole.
Yeah.
Well,
issue
I'm
would be
gonna
done.
write that down.
Well, either that or
so-
listen to it on DCAT some
Or
other.
listen.
Keep in mind that the fair market rate is based on, when we talk about,
It's based on,
yeah, never mind.
it's based on market rates.
I think
Yeah.
that's good what you just said.
It was
But I don't know if
clean.
20% is the
It was-
right.
Right, I don't know if
Yeah.
20%, I mean, it
Just
seemed
put
like a straw man, as a straw person as an approach.
What is that? Did you hear that, John? What if like 20% below?
Is at or below 80% of the HUD fair market value.
How does that sound? Because that's less
And
than.
you'd average it
market.
out with others above.
Is that too high? I mean,
I think that works out real well. The thing though, that at the end of the day, if you're averaging 2% AMI number that we've talked about, you'd have some below, some above. You could simply take the number of units, total rent, divide it, and you'd know above that number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you'd keep it real simple.
He said
Keep it real
60,
simple.
which is what we.
Well, he
He said
Put the
60
AMI.
AMI, then I would just keep it HUD fair.
So maybe, Michael, maybe,
All right, where were we? Who's next?
I think we got a formula.
I think
We
we're getting
We can
somewhere.
wrestle
I think
with the
we-
number exactly, but
Yeah,
that's the
so
formula.
I think that's a workable baseline formula. Yeah.
I also think we could perhaps borrow from the Smith Housing Authority and say that, and what the Randolphs have been doing in practice, but within our ordinance, we could say that, the lease applications where the applicants are in a certain income restriction range as a percentage of AMI are prioritized.
I don't know if you can do that.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
No.
How would you
Yes.
do that?
It's
Well,
not for us to figure
You
out.
go to
is it?
Portsmouth.
Yeah.
Portsmouth is
So
gonna-
what do they do?
so the Portsmouth Housing Authority, they set priorities for their lease applicants, and there are multiple different that. And for them, they also include that they are employed within the city of Portsmouth.
Are they? But finish.
So I just think without, that's not something that we could, I'm not saying that's something that we try to regulate, but we could state that in the intent and the requirements that the developer comes up with their own system, but that lease agreements should prioritize a certain population and it's targeted by income.
And I would go further and say that I think we could police it and we should be more specific. There ought to be priority for, as residency, we've been talking about kind of developer requirements, then there's residents, and I would argue there ought to be an income priority and part of the workforce priority, and that you cannot rent a unit to someone who doesn't meet those requirements unless that unit has sat vacant for a month, 2 months, and you've been trying to give that priority and no one's taking it up. Now you're lifted free of that and you can go do what you need to do to not have vacant units. But I would argue that's how you police the prioritization. And I think it not only is it, I believe legal is actually a beneficial way to show that you are imposing the least restrictive means of achieving your goals by having it be a prioritization and not an absolute.
Sorry. My concern with some of that would be that incentive up front, or that all of a sudden the situation might change for that tenant. So all of a sudden they might start in one situation and then they might end up in another, and then all of a sudden you're in a sort of a difficult position. So I like the spirit of it. I think the implementation is difficult, and I think it might place a burden on whoever's leasing this to not only monitor that, and then there's some auditing, and there's some other things that I think get a little complicated. Like Portsmouth Housing Authority has their charter's slightly different, and I think they're subsidized differently, and they're sort of like structurally different. So I like the spirit of that. I just don't know if I see it being practical in terms of implementation from someone I don't know what those would be, and it seems difficult.
I thought of that as well, and I think the natural checkpoint is when you do a lease renewal. And if it was tied to a lease renewal, information anytime you're doing it's a natural point. If the income qualification check runs the length of, and then when you go to renew, that's when you might have to resubmit. And then at least, a lease renewal point is also when you kind of can expect as a renter make some decisions about whether I will be here or not in the future.
Yeah, I think we get a little, it
The
can get dicey
difficulty,
there.
and I'm just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't want to see people thrown out because they're making too much money, because it could only be.
Go with
You
that.
can go first if you want. Go ahead.
Well, speaking of Portland, I thought I had read, or might have been on the news, about the struggle of people in that situation. So they have a job, they get a one-step promotion, and all of a sudden, they can't stay in their apartment, but then you go to the next level, and so now they're
And they
they're
can't
back in the
afford.
same situation.
that's
So I
not
thought
good.
they stopped,
Once you're in, you're in.
once you're in, you're in.
That's another approach as well.
Yeah, because
It
I
could
think
just
the other
be the
way is,
initial
you might,
qualifying.
it just, the rate compared to the amount more you're gonna have to pay, you just end up getting caught right back into that cycle, and I think it would be better.
Yeah, and it can create issues for children. They have to move out of district. It's
So
disruptive.
first, as to the difficulty doing it, I don't think we're making things up here that aren't being done in the affordable housing arena. And I think the developers that we're going to be dealing with are going to be people who are astute in that arena. So I wouldn't assume that because it sounds difficult and complicated to us, like the 80-20 thing that we just discussed that turned out to be, it sounds like the way it's being done, is too difficult to be implemented. I
But
think we'd find
that
that
would-
people are ready to comply with the requirements of other programs.
So, my question is, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we're only talking about people who are in the fair market rent units, not
Yes.
the ones that are above.
That's
which-
correct. At which point, which is, if we are not imposing an obligation that people, that the entire project, these requirements, then as people income out, they can still stay in. They just end up paying more money, which they can pay because they're making it, and they're no longer in the affordable housing portion of the project. They're in the fair market value portion of the project, and it opens up spots for other people to come in. I think it's very rarely the case where you have both components that anybody's actually throwing people out. And there's a lot of flexibility that it would theoretically would come into place, and there's hardship determinations that the developer's allowed to make. But just leaving it up for grabs and saying you got your golden key and now you're good forever is, to me, not the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Give me a time management question I need to deal with right now for the board. All right, I'm thinking at this point, item 10,
Where?
is everybody with me on
Oh, we were
that?
in
The zoning,
also.
the
Table of
uses.
uses?
Oh, I thought.
Yes, I agree with
I think we should start that fresh.
All right. And we do have a couple of bullets under other business which we should address, as well as several sets of minutes. So I'd like to go maybe another 15 or 20 minutes on this, and then we're going to wrap it up. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
Sure.
All right. I got Rob and then Erica.
I like Tom's formulation there, and I like the idea that the units, the rentals are not tied to the units, the rentals are tied to the rental contract. So as contracts roll off, it's not unit, the first floor is all subsidized, it's different. So that mechanism exists. Use the rent on someone who all of a sudden when they come back for their renewal, you say, okay, congratulations on your excellent raise. Part of the prize
$30
is you
more
pay
money.
a little bit more rent, and here's the formula, and here's why, and
And you can choose.
you can choose. If you don't like that, you can move, but it seems like a very fair mechanism, and no one's ever going to be removed. Because otherwise, how do you raise the rent on any particular unit?
That would be, if I'm
think
hearing
that's-
right, these are set on rents, so we're fair market rents. So we're saying, overall, you've got to have average no more than 100% of HUD fair market rent for all your units, plus you've got to have at least, say, 20% market, and we figure out the bedrooms. So you can have, 20% at 120. And I think that's how we're setting it, and if you want to have income quality, that. But those are the rents and the units. I don't think we want to get into, if this unit is rented here, money, then.
Oh, everybody does that already, Michael. That's not an issue.
No, what I'm saying is that as the averaging, all those mechanisms takes place, if you fall out of the correct average, you need to either lower or raise rents somewhere. And as that happens, you're not telling someone they have to leave because their income is too high and they've goofed up the formula. You're going to wait for the next person to roll out of the place, and that place where someone just rolled out is going to become the new lower income rate. If, the danger is you're going to come above the average rate. As you come above that, someone is going to leave. That becomes the new lower income rent level.
Yep.
And if you have to raise the rent on the other units, that would be okay.
Erica?
I'm an expert of asking basic questions, but we're allowed to control this? We're talking about like the renewal?
I don't think we're managing this
I don't
in
think-
an
So why are we
ordinance
talking
nor in
about
the
it?
Yeah, this would be
implementation.
part of their property management.
So we can we control it at all? Worst case scenario, if we want to be super picky, can we? Do we have that right?
I don't think we can control it to that
You-
extent.
you-
so-
Well, Portsmouth has the Portsmouth Housing Authority,
We
which
don't have,
is its own, it's almost pure from a
bureaucratic system.
Yeah.
It's not an
So
ordinance.
they have a staff bigger than our, so can we? Yes. Should we? That's a different question.
Because I remember that John had mentioned about having to mention to Dover, like, what the rents are, but not what, I don't know if that's just by
Right.
Dover's
Because
choice.
that was Dover's choice.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Richard, did you have something?
Well, I thought, what us for me were suggesting though, at the end of the day, we have to meet a certain average, right? That's because that sort of income. Here's the number of, here's the revenue that was generated, here's the average as it compares to the fair market value.
Leave it at that.
And that's how what we're talking about is sort of how that is achieved, and that is none of our business. That rental agency or the owner is making that happen, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, we're not, as a town
We're
doing
certainly
that.
not.
The town
They
is,
have a
the
formula they gotta
developer
meet,
is.
It's a
the
property
formula
management
and a
situation.
Right,
threshold.
the property manager is,
Yeah,
correct.
they can do it, however.
And these people who are doing fair market housing developments deal with this kind of stuff
Yeah.
all the time. We're not, it's not like we're,
The bigger the developer and the longer they've been in the business, the more tricks and tools they have.
There's a lot.
Peyton?
So I think if we, this model that we're sort of considering here, sort of naturally does some of the things that you want it to do, in that it provides lower priced housing for, let's say, of that population, and then that gets to be not subsidized, but made up on the other side and averaged out at the end. I would just say, as someone who rents properties, that sometimes it's not all based on income. Sometimes it's based on credit score, and sometimes it's based on references, and sometimes it's based on a whole bunch of other criteria. So I don't think just the pure, when you just look at income, that's a very small sliver. And income for one person might be, you might have two people with the exact same income, but they have very different qualities of life. So I think you want to move this burden onto the person who's interviewing people and looking at histories and looking at credit scores and looking at everything else, and then let the model that we're coming up with, and then they can make all the detailed decisions on exactly who is in those units and what they're paying, and at the end of the day, the model just has to wash.
what I'd say is this. We are by definition here, what we're doing, this ordinance, entering into a severe fair market value intervention. Right? We're intervening in the workings of the fair market. That's what we're doing by definition. Once we've done that once, to then walk away from it and say, now we're just going to let the fair market take it over, I think simply means that in a matter of time, whether that's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, we get right back to fair market value. Right? If we don't continue to have some mechanism that maintains what we put in place in the first place, it's just going to go where the market goes. And so what will end up, lots of people who over the course of their careers, as incomes have raised up and they haven't left, and they're there in what subsidized housing. That's where the market will go. And so
Yes, and Heather?
Well, I think that the keep it simple thing, I think, is the fact that we have that they must meet that average. Some people will be in there at lower and some will be at higher, and that mix will stay in some sort of balance naturally. They're the ones that have to know that their compliance is to meet an average at the 100
For the rent levels.
for the rent levels. And that means that somebody has to be in there at the lower end if we have not 100% of.
what people are paying, it has nothing to do with the nature of the person who's paying it.
And we can come have a fair amount of.
Yep.
Yeah.
It would be worth.
We're not done on that.
Okay.
Yeah, it would
on
be
that
worth
topic.
investigating that. I get where you're
Because
going.
I definitely hear what Rob is saying, which is,
But didn't.
once you're in, we don't want to throw you out, but at the same time, we want to make sure you're paying appropriate shit. You might have gotten in a great deal of need, but now you can afford to subsidize somebody else. Let's make sure that that's happening.
I think that's why, I think, Peyton, you brought up the fact that it's such a percentage of them would have to be like in the 50 or 60% range, right?
That's just rent.
Okay. I'm just
You're
saying
thinking
it's-
point in time. You got to
No,
think of it
because-
as time moves on.
Well, it's always going to be based on that level, that next year's HUD value,
that
right?
average.
Yeah, but if you only do an income check when they first enter the unit, okay? And 10 years later, they've graduated from, hey, I just walked in and I'm manning the cashier, to I'm the deli department manager. You know, should they be, that person still be paying the same rent that the cashier is?
Wouldn't you think, though, as people get up in the values enough, it's not everybody, because some people like to stay in their apartment for 30 years, but in general, there's movement in the marketplace.
There's movement, and what was pointed out was that when there is movement, okay, so just because you make more doesn't mean your rent's necessarily going to go up right away, because it might put the entire development
Right.
over its threshold. But the ability to say this particular person has moved from being in a subsidized unit to being in a non-something that there's interest in tracking.
We need to be careful about not micromanaging here, because this is this is in perpetuity. And how much oversight is there going to be by this town when I'm gone in 10 years and 20 years? To do, and we need a report in perpetuity. And if this report is so complicated about where the rents are and who's living where, it ain't gonna. It needs to be pretty simple. This is in perpetuity, 5 planners out from now.
Agreed, which is why we need to be careful how we try to enforce it. Okay, but I'm not saying. But the last thing I'm going to say is we've made the final call on how this is going to work.
And if I may, this conversation has been assuming as well 100% rentals. If we're doing any units for sale or any ownership options, which we've not yet had, then I think that's a very different game in terms of income qualifying people, because otherwise you could have someone with a $250,000 income who's psyched to have a smaller $400,000, dollar condo or cottage. So I think that we need to talk about ownership and then come back to this, but we can't have a conversation about income qualifications before having around ownership options.
Yeah, I would just have us stop talking about income qualifications at this point.
And the income, just as the income is just one sliver, all of a sudden then you start thinking about assets. And then you might think about, well, their income is this, but their debt is that. And they're all of, the market is a fairly efficient rater of let's say, credit risk. And there are a lot of calculations that are already taking place to do this. And if all of a sudden you're looking at one sliver of that, and that's your metric, well, there are a lot of other things at play there. And I would say we don't want to be, that's a complex business that the person or the group or the corporation that is managing this, they're better positioned to think through those and to change that at their discretion, as long as the weighting at the end of the year comes out, to put things in place that they must comply with.
All right. Richard?
So, when I left for a moment, I come back and I hear it's settled. We have an equation, or we had a formula or something like that.
Okay.
And that's what I sat down. So I'm just curious, what was that?
It's not that we're settled, it's we have a working model.
Okay, and what is the model?
So the model was the idea that we're going to require 20% of the units to be rented at a level that is, and here's the 80% of the fair market rate. Okay, and that the whole average for the unit, for the development, needs to come in at 100%.
Right. Okay. I mean, while we were all having this discussion, someone brought up a table over there, or something like that. The spreadsheet example is what you gave. So I opened up the spreadsheet, and I thought, as you increase the percent affordability, you're allowed to then increase the number of fair market rental units. Meaning that if you only have 65% of your units are affordable, that means that 80% of those need to be at 0.6% or 60% of the fair market rate. And as you increase the affordable units, you're to more units being sold at fair market.
Yeah.
Rented, yes.
Okay. And that would open up a variety of smarter people than me to get in there and play around with a spreadsheet to see what their best bet is.
Right.
All right.
The
it
optimal
allows-
mix. They're searching for the optimal mix.
What happens is, and the other flip side of what you guys were talking about is, so somebody ends up being, you get a few people who are paying a lot more over the 100%, then that allows more and more people at
Right.
60% or 40%.
Because at the end, all we're looking at is here's the number of units, here's the total income, so we can figure it out, compare it to fair market and say, yep, you're within that range of plus or minus the fair market.
Yes.
Yeah,
the rents,
I like
yes.
that.
I mean, yeah, I think that's nice, but we need to also think about by bedrooms. So are we doing this for each? Otherwise, somebody could rig it, and they could say, well, I'm gonna have all my low ones are the 1 bedrooms, and all my 3 bedrooms are the high. They skew their income, but I don't know, we can talk
I
more
think
about
just
that.
across the board, whatever you're building, that's going to be that way.
It is skewed as bad as you are concerned about.
I think it doesn't matter.
Because in the end, it's total revenue over what a 100% market rate would have been.
All right, so don't worry about
So-
bedrooms.
Don't
so-
worry about bedrooms.
I
All right,
agree.
So you don't need to worry about
Okay.
bedrooms, because that
All right.
simply means that, okay, so, what if all the 1 bedrooms are going at 20%?
Yeah.
Or 25%? You know what that means? That means you got a lot
Well, that's
of
true.
disabled vets and stuff out there living in those units.
Okay.
And that's just a good, that's a good
And
space.
that's great.
Yeah.
And they're trying to, or 2 bedrooms, or 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And whatever that mix is, they're gonna play with those, because you're gonna get a little rent, the more units you can do, because
Yeah.
the more units you get, there's more
The more apples you
rent
have
you're
to
gonna
sell.
get.
And the
I
way
think
that
we're at a
prices work, you still
good
always
stopping
get
point.
relatively more for.
Yeah.
Right? We're at a good stopping point.
But-
Not sure, I mean, we made some progress.
We
on
we
paper.
did, but, it's, boy, tick tock, when we look at the amount of time that we've spent on this issue, we do need to bring it to a close, right?
Yes.
Because it's gonna leave us and go to council, right?
Yeah, but we also want to make sure that
Yeah.
are solid with it.
I get it.
Yeah.
So here's my suggestion. If we can afford, is there an application out there for us next time?
On this, a project, you mean?
A project.
Oh, no, we don't.
There isn't. Maybe this is the only subject that we're talking about in hopes of getting our plate and off to, because we got to go to public hearing again. And then it goes to council and they got to go to public hearing.
God knows what.
Now, we also have a tentative meeting on, an extra one on July 31st.
All right. So
Do
that's
we
my
wanna
only
meet
point
then?
that I wanted to make is perhaps this needs to be the only agenda.
Yeah.
And we come in rolling up our sleeves saying, it's time for us to get something on paper out of here.
Okay,
All right?
So you want to meet on July 31st meeting this month?
yes,
Sure.
next month.
Oh, right, that's
July.
July, yeah, 7th.
Till June.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to point out that I will actually be missing next 2 meetings. I will be not in
Your
town.
vacation.
I'll get to see Erica.
Oh, Tom, you better be, we're going to push this to
I will.
100%.
No, you won't.
this is
I will
strike when
try
the
and,
iron's
I will
hot
try and,
Zoom in.
I will try and keep up, and in particular on the discussions with,
You can feel
Okay.
free to send some terse emails if you.
Other business. So there's been prodded several times about whether or not we can fix our definition of family. Different people have different complaints about our definition of family.
I think we can do better.
But then we want to try to address, I mean, after this discussion and the comment about we really should be focusing on one thing, do we want to start, I mean, what do people think about this definition of household and family? And should we be trying to set aside some time to work on it in the near future?
I remember reading a definition when we were going over the definitions that I clearly remember something about nurses or servants, and we talked for half an hour about how that's no longer applicable. And
We
they're,
got rid of the servant thing.
I did
I thought we
too.
did get rid of the survey.
Yeah, exactly. So we did that work already. So wherever that was, can that be like found again and applied? We had this
So-
What is
conversation.
The town council was nice enough to throw it back at us.
Okay.
All right, so this is what M didn't tell you about the
Thank you
council
very
update.
much.
I thought
Heather
it was on the
decided to
agenda
skip
already.
over it as well. So
Didn't I mumble?
the town council had enough comments to make that they didn't want to bring our definitions to public hearing. So he sent them back. And we are going to need to take a look. To be honest, a lot of what their comments are they're asking for clarification on stuff.
Yeah, something is just,
They just didn't understand what was being done. So I think what we need to send it back, that we provide a written addendum that answers all the questions that they brought forth,
yeah.
and suggestions that they made, and explain specifically why we did not act on some we don't act on with regards to their
I don't
suggestions.
think, and there weren't very many. I mean,
There weren't a lot.
It's not a lot, and
Suggestion as for the household, for the household family definition is when we sit and do that, let's work on the family definition.
Right.
and
Send
then
them
come up with
an
a couple of
example.
more, because, yeah, there's more examples than
Send that, and let the
Hanover's.
council
You just gotta
decide which
start
one they
looking
like.
for the towns
So,
again.
do,
We're gonna find.
shall I sit on this until we're finished with workforce housing?
Oh, no, don't do that.
No.
That's almost done.
No, I think we can,
You'll finish that pretty readily.
but I don't know about that, Michael.
In July,
We'll
you'll
put it-
finish that in July. We have 3 meetings in July.
You can prep it, we'll put it, make it the last item on the agenda, and if we get time for it, we'll get time for it.
All right, so the next you have July 10th,
But-
July 24th, and then July 31st, a week later. July 10th, our next meeting is the workforce housing is the first item, and then definitions after that?
Yeah. So, oh, and just if you want to chuckle, we got through this with the town council in 2 nights, and it's slow.
Good. I just,
Well, that
So
means we
is
did
there
a good
flavor?
job,
Is there a
right?
flavor to the comments? Is it wordsmithing or is it
some
substantive?
was just questions.
There were a couple of good catches. Some of it was wordsmithing, and some of it is valid disagreement.
There were some questions about how the table of uses were being affected. So there were some comments about why not, since the table of uses was included with the definitions, because they have to kind of be submitted together. There were some comments on changing some permissions to the table of uses, and the question of whether that should just be maybe those comments saved for a more in-depth discussion of table uses. And there were some concerns around how some change definitions currently would actually affect what's able to be built on the ground. And so whether we need to do actually a little more thorough work with the table of uses before we can pass, or simultaneous to passing the definitions.
A specific concern that was brought up by a couple of members of the public was that when you took the whole combination of changes to our definitions on the table of uses, that that a parking lot over at 1921 Main Street could occur.
There's a gap of control.
But the thing is because we're making some changes to the table of uses.
I'm just
I think
saying that's
people were
what it
just-
is.
Yes, that's true, but other people were confused because they went through this, not knowing that the only thing that had changed was really related to the descriptions.
Yeah.
And even when we were going through this, there were individuals on the planning board that kept saying, well, what about the table of uses? So I honestly don't think it's a bad idea to run them together. I brought that up at the town council, I'll bring it
Yeah.
up here, because,
Yeah.
I don't know, I marked mine up the week that we were gonna start looking at them.
We
And
could-
I thought would be fast. I know that's silly of me.
I mean, it was the
always
next thing we were going to work on anyway, so if we wanted,
Yeah, that's
and
what I was
bundling it
thinking.
together might make sense. Okay, so household, family, and maybe table of uses will get bundled into our review of the definitions. Then the second bullet during our early meeting agenda agreement was a downtown housing review that Tom and Peyton have been working on. And you wanted to report or whatever?
No, I actually don't think there's anything to discuss, right? I mean, several meetings ago, that whether to extend overlay districts to other districts, there was an agreement that those were different than the districts that we're looking at, and they couldn't be as the same zoning amendment. And Peyton and I offered to undertake on a parallel track to develop something that ultimately come back to the planning board, and that's what we've been doing. There was a question raised by Michael when we were asking about some density factors in some of these other districts as to whether it made sense for us to be doing that now or whether we should just be waiting. And I think at least Peyton and my feeling is we've been working on it, we would continue.
That's exactly right. And so what we've done is we've kind of have a rough draft where we've outlined, pulled language essentially from the master plan that talks about, pull downtown, trying to limit sprawl. And so we've mapped in some objectives, and then we've defined an area that, and then now we're looking at what are the bonuses and what are the densities that, how would we get those densities? What would we do? Do you get an extra story if you add a story of affordable housing? What are some additional density levers that you might put in play? And, those change across districts or not. But so we're working on that for trading emails, and then we're looking to Michael sometimes for
Help
some
us
additional
understand.
help with
Yep.
some language and some ideas there. And we're also looking, I think, at how other towns are doing that. And I think the downtown's different than the one that we're looking at right here. And I think it makes sense to really
Yeah.
think about that before some additional development takes place downtown.
Because it's completely different animal, like,
Yeah.
completely, and
Okay, well, when you have some ideas that are ready, you can bring them to us for a discussion. Just let me know, and Michael and I can get it onto the agenda.
And I think we would probably want to have Michael probably okay the
Yeah.
draft for us, so, you're the expert in the language and everything that's taking place, and when you think it's ready, we could.
Yeah, I
Sure,
think
that's
it's-
fine.
Well, before you might want to, before you put too much effort
Yeah.
into draft, maybe just bring a list of bullet points of changes you think you want to,
Correct.
and then we could, sort of give a preliminary up and down on each bullet.
Okay.
And go from there. I
That's a
think
great
we're
idea.
at the stage now of trying to get some input from Michael, because I think we've gotten a little lost in the weeds on it, at least I have, of what those, as Peyton called it, density levers might be, right? In each of these districts, exactly what is it in the existing zoning ordinance that imposes an explicit or implicit density limit, so that we know which ones we'd be looking at to modify to ease that up some.
you might want to also reach out to Rich Rain and ask him to kind of give you the lowdown, the services, water, sewer,
so-
in downtown, and the challenges they have there, because the town
That's actually a terrific point. We were sort of trading some emails about that too, and we were thinking of, well, you could all of a sudden say, okay, you have story height, and then all of a sudden you could have this many, let's say, apartments or whatever, and then all of a sudden the infrastructure downtown is just not able to support that. So there is
And it's not.
a question about, are there constraints, infrastructure constraints downtown that might prevent that? And then would you have to pass those costs on to a developer to hook up and fix that infrastructure? There might be.
There are challenges downtown, and the expectation right now, from what I understand, is the town expects a developer to pick up the cost.
Right.
Which could be a make it or break it.
And then just one more question on that. So as I think we've been doing this, I historically look back at the language that was in place at different times on the zoning. And in Dover, they have a nice structure where in the zoning ordinance themselves, they include exactly when that area was updated. And they'll say, see this, this is when it was updated. And then you can go and you can reference that. It is, historically, it would be nice to be able to look back and see, okay, what were the changes were made and when were they made in terms of stories or density or that, and maybe either borrow language from those documents or at least consider them. So kind of moving forward, I think we should consider a way that someone 10 years out could look at the original document that we had and then the updated document as we're making even these changes right now. So someone,
We do have records upstairs of all the amendments and the
Yeah, we
exact
do.
language.
right, but it would be nice available electronically so
A
that
link.
you could go and, I could go and I could say, okay, prior to all of our changes, this was the base document. And now this is the,
I
like,
think Portsmouth does that with its ordinances, if I'm remembering correctly, so you might want to check out what that looks like and how they do
almost
that.
like a source code
It's like
diff. Say, okay,
it's
what's,
basically revision control.
yeah, it's like a version history. So you could say, oh, there used to be this. And then in 2008, they rolled it all back. Or in 2010, they rolled it all back. What did they roll back?
To what end, though, are we keeping track of this as opposed to today is
Today,
whatever
we-
today is?
Today is, we have, if the amendment gets approved, the new one goes into play and the old one, the change goes into the record. So you could always, to see what changed, you need to go back through each old revision and see if it was revising the area that you're looking at.
Which means
What-
coming
but
in.
what is the value of that future ordinances and trying to figure out what to do?
Well, if you
To
knew-
roll back things because
So
we
if
can
we,
restrict
if we
them,
look,
or?
if we were to say, well, we knew our building had a couple of peaks and a couple of valleys over the last 20 years, what changed prior to each of those changes in our zoning that might have affected that or caused that? Right now, it's a tedious search to figure that out.
So there might
Whereas
be.
if you had diversion control that said, oh, this page was updated with just these three, during these three amendments, then it would be easier, a lot easier to find. You could go right to the amendments as opposed to searching every single one.
Also, sometimes it's helpful to know when stuff was too restrictive and considering maybe you've gone from one thing and you've opened up language and now you're experiencing problems and you're trying to put in specific language to be able to look back, like it was something we discussed with the WCOD rewrites, that, you know, you can look back and say, well, that actually is something changed and for whatever reason they got rid of it. It means it didn't work for some reason.
Yeah,
Right,
like the
it's a
downtown,
useful-
the density downtown, when after they took a very low density or a very high density to an extremely low density,
Are we-
and basically,
Ready to move on?
I just want to make a pitch for keeping the definition clean. You did a tremendous amount of work. Council made great comments. I'm very confident that if you focus on the definitions, you get through their comments pretty readily, make a few adjustments, and get it done.
Don't do a
And
reread.
Don't, if you combine it with table of uses, then you say, well, let's combine it. You'll never get it done. You have a nice, clean thing, it's ready to go. If you combine it with table of uses and more changes, then the whole thing again in council. Keep it clean, this will get done.
Minutes.
You're almost there.
April 24th? Do you have any substantive changes? We're good?
I was fine.
I was absent, for example, on April 24th, so.
Move that we accept the minutes April 24th?
So Heather should vote for me if she was here.
She was.
Yeah, she was.
You're in on this one.
I didn't look at them because I didn't think I was going to vote on them.
All right, then abstain.
Abstain.
No, she wasn't here on the 24th.
Which one?
Members absent, she was not.
Oh, we had, was that was the
April.
night we had no council rep? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you were,
that's
you
because
were
I was
just had
having my
surgery.
hip surgery the next day, and I was in.
All right. Then you can abstain on that one then.
All right, then I'll abstain.
Have we voted?
We haven't, I was waiting for a second on the motion.
All right.
By
Second.
Sally, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain.
And
M's going to
abstentions are
abstain, yeah.
Richard and M. Anybody opposed?
No, because the other ones
All
are
right.
gone.
And May 8th? right. I'll move that we accept the minutes of May 8th.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Everybody approved. And May 29th. Yeah, the minutes have been simple lately, right? I'll move that we...
I'll second that.
Seconded by Sally. All in favor? Aye.
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 Abstentions?
No, that was an aye on mine.
I don't know yet.
Remind myself.
Seeing if I was there. Yeah, too. I arrived late, but I'm voting in favor.
All right. Abstentions? And no, and there were no abstentions on that one. Okay.
Well, Paul, just to clarify for the agenda for July 10th, so 1 is workforce housing, 2 is definitions, and then do you want 3 household definition and table of uses? Are those on there, or are those
do
part of
household
definitions?
We're going to do
or-
household's part of the, we already did household. Okay, so household was in the definitions that was submitted to the town council.
Uh-huh,
So I mean, we could just double check that as we go through it.
Because the household includes family.
and it should so should the second item just be definitions, or do you want to include any reference to table of uses or household?
Decided we were
Do the definitions, and this time when we do, as we go through, do the definitions, maybe not for us, but at least for, and really for us too, because let's have the full, like a
Oh, okay.
clean
Yeah, I'll-
thing of the full
okay.
definitions.
Yeah.
Because it was confusing a lot of people when they see a definition in the changes.
Yeah, so I'll have the whole article in there as well.
Yeah.
Chair, if I may, for the benefit of clarity, I had understood that we had concluded we were going to review the amendments and the table of uses now together. After Michael gave us the input that he thought that was a bad idea, it's now unclear to me where we are.
Well, I don't know that you decided that.
We haven't
Where-
decided, so.
Where are we?
We will have the table of uses in front of us when we go through the definitions, okay? Whether or not we actually have time for them next meeting.
Okay.
When we do get around to talking about the definitions, we will make that decision of whether or not we're going to include the table of uses.
Okay.
Just a question. Should, in the definition and the table of uses, should we do the definitions and maybe a light pass through the table of uses just to fill any holes, or should we do a real pass through the table of uses after the definitions in case there's a gap that does need to be resolved?
I would want to avoid anything that's going to end up being controversial. It would be my suggestion, okay? I'm all for a light pass to the table of uses, because really, what we were talking about was, we were going to do potentially a light pass to the table of uses tonight. Get rid of some of the low-hanging fruit, right? Which of these conditional uses can we make X or P type deals? Is there anything that, we have zones that, so here's something you can look at, actually. First 8 lines of the residential section of the table of uses, we got single-family houses are on some, we got places, we have zones where we allow multi-unit if it's senior housing.
Yeah.
Okay, but not for any other purpose. Why? I mean, from a use perspective, if it's good enough for the old fogies, it should be good enough for the kids.
But they don't want students.
They don't have to be in the same development, they could be in the same development, but why do we allow, I mean, if the idea is it's a use, and it's a multi-unit, so we might want to look at evening out some of those rows, so that they make more sense in compare, along with each other.
I'm not opposed to that. Well, I guess my concern would be, one is there's a gap or two that has been identified based on the definition.
Yeah.
The other is even to your point, some of those that might seem low-hanging fruit could get complicated. And all of a sudden, so I don't know, do you mind having Do you want to do the definitions and the table of uses at exactly the same time, or do you want to wrap up the definitions and then we have a gap on table of uses, take a pass through the table of uses?
The town council was also confused by the fact that we were only updating, why we only updated some rows that, when other rows seemed obvious that we should have changed as well. So
Yeah,
the town council is kind of expecting us to take another crack at the table of
I think we
uses.
need to do both at the same time.
So when we decision, let's hear from the council reps, and then we'll all decide how to go forward. Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Maybe they can get some clarity,
maybe you could.
meaning as to what the council would prefer to see. I mean, would they want us to go through the table of uses a little more closely?
That question, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, if you look at the comments, you'll see where the identified gaps were and what concerns were raised, but we could ask, you know, if it makes sense to them, if we explain it as, this is not a thorough review of the table of uses, but we're addressing stuff that was affected by the definitions, and we'll have another round or not. So we can definitely ask that question. And then I do think I think the council is going to be looking at the definition of household because of unrelated household and revisiting that. That's a priority, I think, for the council and towns. Think, you know, that doesn't mean that the planning board has to revisit it if the definition we have, then we should stick with that for now. But I think it's good to know that some different proposals for that definition are gonna come forward at some point in the next year. And so if we felt to add anything now, we could, and if we wanna wait until we see what other ideas come forth, we could do that too, because any ordinance change would come before the planning board for review and a public hearing. So we would see any other ideas too.
So someone's going to initiate a change.
Yes.
And I'm looking
believe
at
so.
what we sent to the council, and those changes were very minor.
And is some of that coming from the state level as well?
It's in reaction to the fact that
I think it's
the
at the
state
beginning of that
will
paper.
probably take action. The state narrowly rejected a revocation of the 3 unrelated rule. And the feeling among our state reps is that don't think you have to dodge that bullet again next year and the year after and the year after until eventually it goes away.
So does your peer in Hanover feel that their definition that you have here is bulletproof and is, I'll leave it at that. And they don't share that concern that you and our administrator have here in Durham.
They do in Hanover.
They do as well. So it's not like this is the silver bullet. We just take Hanover's definition and.
No, I mean, theirs is a little more detailed and probably more up to date than ours, but they're also concerned about what's going on in Concord.
They were one of the other towns along with, I want to say Nashua, that wrote in,
Or Keene.
Keene, yeah.
I don't know if Keene wrote in
Anyways.
the end,
It's
but
actually pretty easygoing.
there were several towns and cities that wrote saying that they were concerned about to basically remove local zoning oversight on kind of household in terms of the unrelated numbers.
Okay. So, all right, that's enough for tonight.
So-
But we've got this, someone's gonna act on this definition, and it may be us when when we're
If we
talking
see-
definitions next time or the time after that, whenever that is, okay?
It may be us.
And so be it.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Or if we decide we've done the best we can, somebody else. Yeah.
like our
if-
lawyer could do that.
I don't think anyone's gonna have a definition before our next meeting.
Nope.
So is the
We may get one
definition,
later on.
is the definition for household used anywhere other than to help define the 3 unrelated rule
That's the
or
main
support it? I asked the question of,
I'm
if we
sorry.
know this is all going away in a couple of years, why waste time on it?
Are we sure it's going
Because they're trying to have, they need a parachute. If 3 unrelated is abolished, the town is concerned, well, then what do we do to then control student populations in our neighborhoods? And
I don't see how a better definition of household supports that,
Well,
would help with that.
Well,
I think we could firm up a better.
I'm saying, oh, you can only have one household in a unit?
The best, all they're talking about really, it gets down to transient versus non-transient. Thing in that is that, and that defines students that rent are transient.
you think so? Many of them vote here in Durham.
Good night.
And
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
maybe
just
not 2
saying.
years from now.
maybe not, but.
But who do you define anybody, right?
Be living
But
here.
anyway, I'm just
I go
saying.
back, if it all hits the fan, I think we take a look and tear the playbook out of Radnor Township.
Township.
Radnor Township.
Very strict.
What do they do?
Pennsylvania, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not a student, no 2 students in 1,000 square miles or 1,000-foot radius. or
1,000
something.
feet.
Yeah.
Is the chair
No
willing
2
to entertain a
students.
motion
One
to
student
adjourn?
per 1,000 feet.
We have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?